Welcome to this special meeting of the City Governance Committee, which is being held in a hybrid format in terms of Section 43 of the Local Governance in Scotland Act 2003. All members in attendance are able to fully participate in the meeting, which is being live streamed. By participating in the meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and recorded. Should any member need to leave the meeting for any reason, can they please use the chat to advise of this? If a member loses their connection, they should make every effort to rejoin the meeting, but if this is not possible, the Committee Services Officer will note their absence for the remainder of the meeting. If you have to leave the meeting due to a declaration of interest, you must remain out of the meeting until invited back in. Would all members please mute their microphones when not speaking to avoid background noise, and turn off any smart speakers. If you are to be the next speaker, please allow a pause after the last speaker has muted their microphone. Please then press the right-hand button on your console to activate your microphone. If you are joining the meeting remotely, please start the meeting with your camera on. Your face will then appear on the screen when you are speaking. If your connection is poor, you may wish to turn off your camera and see if this improves matters. If this doesn't help, you may wish to quickly leave the meeting and rejoin. If you wish to raise a point of order, ask a question, speak on any item or move a motion or amendment, please use the chat when the relevant item is called. The convener will then invite you to speak. Please do not use the hands up function or intervene in any other way. Would members of the press and public please not post messages in the chat? Please would members not use the chat for any other purposes, as those joining the meeting by telephone cannot see the chat and therefore will not be able to follow the debate. Although we are operating in a different way, this is still a formal meeting of the committee, and the required standards of conduct and discussion are the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Standing orders apply to the proceedings, and the provisions of the Councillors' Code of Conduct also apply in the usual way. Does any member have any queries regarding these procedures? There are no queries, convener, so I'll now ask the Committee Services Officer to take a roll call for the minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now take a roll call for the minute, and I would ask if members would confirm they're present when I call their name. Bailey Soares.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Anderson.
I'm here.
Councillor Black.
Yes, I'm here.
Lord Provost Campbell.
Present.
Deputy Lord Provost Cardell.
Present.
Bailey Dawson.
I'm here.
And I've received apologies from Councillor O'Nacla. Councillor Flynn.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Hunter.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Councillor Mills.
Hi, I'm here.
Bailey Roberts.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Rome.
Good afternoon, present.
Councillor Short.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor Smith.
I'm here.
Councillor Toland.
I am here.
Bailey Keenan.
Present.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Present.
Councillor Finnegan.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Councillor McHugh. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McIrvin.
Present.
Councillor Scullen.
Present.
Councillor Shears.
Present.
Bailey Wright.
Present.
Bailey McPherson.
Good afternoon, present.
Councillor Coleman.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Crichton.
Here.
Councillor Duncan.
Here.
Bailey Scott.
Here.
Okay, that concludes the roll call. The next item for is declarations of interest. That's for any members of any declarations to the content of the agenda as it stands. There being no declarations, I could now advise the committee that a request for a deputation has been received from Noel Kemlow of Tartan Coffee House to address the committee in relation to car parking charges. Is the committee minded to hear the deputation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. We can now call Mr. Kemlow forward. The lectern position.
Mr. Kemlow is a lectern down in this corner of the room. You've got up to 7 minutes to address the committee, and then if you can stay at the lectern in case any members have questions for you. Thank you.
Kim, if you'd like to press your microphone, it's to the right-hand side.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for letting me speak today. The background to this is that I'm from the West End of Dundee and I'm a part owner in 2 retail businesses on the Perth Road in Dundee. The nearest car park to our businesses is Miller's Wynd, and I come here today just to ask several points be taken into consideration before finalising any car parking charges there. Miller's Wynd was always different to the other car parks in the area, and it was to encourage visitors and shoppers. In 2017, it became a council car park. It was free for 2 hours, after which time every vehicle had to move on. There was no return within 75 minutes. This meant a high turnover of vehicles. I have a photo of the sign at that time. The new pricing structure was introduced in January 2020, and it's currently still free for 2 hours, £1 for 4 hours, and £2 for all day. There is not a no return policy, which means that drivers can keep adding tickets physically or on the app and park all day for free. Compare this to charges in the city centre, where it can be over £10 to stay all day. This has meant that most days the car park is full by the time we open, and full until late afternoon, and very low turnaround of cars. People working close by or in town are taking advantage of this charging structure, and to be honest, I can't blame them for doing so. We and other businesses on the Perth Road are trying to grow our business and get the area busier with visitors and customers. The way, obviously, we grow our business is by having more customers who visit more often, and this cannot be achieved if they cannot park. We have had many regular customers tell us that they couldn't get parked on a previous day, a previous visit, and had to go elsewhere, so we lost that business. When the charges were introduced in 2020, the deputy convener of the development committee at that time said that the charges would help encourage turnover of spaces for shoppers and businesses. I have a copy of what was said, but it's actually had the opposite effect. I must emphasise that this situation is severely affecting growth. It's not meaning we'll go out of business, but we're just finding it hard to grow the business because we can't get any more customers coming to us. We could spend a lot of money on marketing and entice new customers, but if they can't park, then they won't be able to visit us. So a solution, firstly, I don't want to be proposing higher charges if possible, and I strongly sympathise with the workers in the area who find it difficult to park. The West End has a serious parking problem which needs to be somehow addressed. However, there has to be a compromise which will help the area and local businesses. If Miller's Wynd could revert back to a short stay car park of some sort, it would be very, very beneficial to the businesses. Could there be a no return stipulation, say after 4 hours? The car park is very cheap, and hopefully it will stay that way, but we do need to find a high turnover of cars. I'd say that I don't think people would mind paying a small charge, say £1, to park for 2 hours or so. At the moment, it's obviously free. I'm saying this because the council might be concerned about a loss in revenue or whatever. In the grand scheme of things today, I know and appreciate this is a major issue for the council, but for us, every visitor and customer counts. I'm obviously happy to answer any questions you may have, either now or at a later date.
Okay, Mr. Kimmel, thank you for that presentation to the committee. I see Bill McPherson has a question.
Thanks, Convener. I should start by perhaps declaring a slight interest because I know Noel extremely well. Noel, I understand your the problem obviously about the whole situation about turnover. In part, the issue, of course, is that residents also park there, and my group has always taken the view that this should all be encompassed as part of a residence parking scheme, because whilst you might want turnover of shoppers, residents don't want to have to move their car every 4 hours or whatever. As I say, that's the view that we've always taken. That we've taken the view that the car park should be free, but you should have limited waiting for non-residents. Would you see some merit in that?
Yeah, I do understand, Fraser, and that's where I say we'll have to come to a compromise. But if you visit the car park very early in the morning, which I did this morning, there were very few cars there, and people were coming to park there. It wasn't residents that were parking there. It was workers, either at the university or in the town. And as I say, I don't want to upset them and take away this kind of bargain that they've got, but I'm just looking for a compromise. So where you're saying that the residents can need somewhere to park, they can park in the car park overnight, no problem. But when people are parking round about 8 o'clock in the morning, between 8 and 8:30, it's workers that are coming to park there, not residents.
Thanks very much, Noel. I agree with that. The way of differentiating is simple. If you have a residence parking scheme, residents have a permit, non-residents don't, and you can deal with it in that manner. But I'm very grateful for your input, Noel. It is appreciated.
Thank you.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, that wasn't working. Just flip it around and answer the question and the comment, and I don't want to trip you up because that was a really good deputation and I appreciate your spirit of compromise. So the question is really, have you had any conversations with officers so far about this? And what I would say is that I'm very open to the idea of looking at it going forward, and I think your suggestion of a compromise is a sensible one.
Thank you. I have a list of emails. I've emailed lots of people in the council, and because the charges were introduced in 2020, they all said there's nothing we can do until the next meeting. So I've expressed our concerns to them, but they're all saying there just wasn't anything they could do. They understood the problem, especially the no return, which is a bit silly. They understood all these issues, but they said that there just wasn't anything they could do to raise it at the next meeting.
Thanks very much if I can, Chair. Just to say that's really helpful, and I think it's a bit late just now for changing the rear charges, but happy to look at that issue going forward.
Okay. Yeah. Can I just ask then? I know I see on the budget proposals that the charges are pretty much the same. They're just going up from £1 to £1.10 or £2 to £2.20. Is that fixed then? There's nothing we're doing about that today?
Not at this present time, but as I say, we'll look at that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Switch the microphone off, please. Okay, thank you. Willie?
Yeah, thanks very much. Convener, that then takes you on to the substantive item, revenue budget and council tax, which is before you.
Okay, so we have a motion from myself. We've had an amendment from the Labour group which has been circulated. I am assuming, perhaps wrongly, that there will be other amendments. So, Councillor Duncan, I can see you're indicating that the Liberal Democrats and amendment, perhaps we could get that circulated, and then, given that's the first time anybody else in the chamber will have seen it, I'm suggesting a recess until 25 to 3 to give us 20 minutes to have a look at it. So if that could be circulated, that would be very helpful. And we'll see you back in 20 minutes. everyone back. So if we could recommence, please. So I think firstly, we're moving to a formal situation. Do any members have questions or officers on the content of any of the proposed budgets? Billy McPherson, I think you're first.
Thanks, convener. Our group chose not to take the 1% cut in devolved school budgets, and that really followed advice from officers, where they listed 5 reasons, if you like, as disadvantages in taking that. Which were variously impact on education quality, effect on vulnerable pupils, effect on extracurricular activities, teacher strain, and reputational risks. Now, in the response I was given back from officers...
Billy McPherson, we're not here to have a speech at the moment. We're here to have questions.
Yeah, I'm asking a question,
officers,
and if you
please.
don't interrupt, I'll be able to ask my question. So,
just get on to it quite quickly,
well,
please.
You're still interrupting, and I'll get on to it once you've stopped interrupting. So, in the mitigation strategies, it indicates to mitigate negative aspects, head teachers will collaborate with central officers to explore all options assessing
Billy McPherson, can we get to a question, please, rather than a treatise?
That's incredibly rude. I'm asking a question. Let me finish. How will collaboration with central officers allow for any mitigation to stop any bad effects of the 1% cut in devolved school budgets? Perhaps officers could give me some indication.
Eventually a question. Mrs. May, please.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Billy McPherson, for the question. And indeed, you've summarised, I think, the IIA that we had there to suggest that we could, and there may be some challenges there, and so we would expect our head teachers to work with us, as they do very well, around unintended consequences, looking at collective resources. We still have SEF money, which was our Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund, and collectively we can look at mitigations to support schools.
Okay, I'm grateful for
Mrs.
that.
May.
I think challenges is exactly the word, but thank you very much, Mrs. May.
Councillor Flynn, you're next, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just a bit of clarity. I'll go straight to the question with regards to the proposed reduction in staffing levels from the Labour and Lib Dems proposals. Can we maybe get a comment from officers on the feasibility of the full saving being achieved in that first year, bearing in mind that we're talking about 4.5 million and 4.1 million of savings? And I'm not going to circle around the number of posts because that could vary greatly. We just want a bit of clarity on the feasibility and whether it's possible or not.
Mr. Emmett.
So thank you, convener. So when we'd identified this as an option for budget savings, we put it forward because we believed it could be achieved. Clearly, the higher sum that you're seeking to achieve in the year will come with a greater challenge in terms of implementation and in terms of risk. So members will be aware that we're bringing forward a report on voluntary severance at the beginning to committee on Monday, and that will provide a vehicle for assisting with that process. We know that in the current year we've achieved savings in the order of 2 to 3 million from slippage in staff, and that gives us an idea of what can potentially be achieved. So we believe both a saving of around about 4.5 million could be achieved. The higher or the greater amount of that members choose to take as part of their budget, the more challenges there will be around implementation of it. But obviously, officers will work with the decision of the council.
Good. Thanks very much, convener. Thanks for the response, Robert. I just want a bit of clarity as well on the basis that under the current proposal, we don't, as our party, we don't believe in compulsory redundancies. Would there be a case if this was to be achieved and be an in-year pressure if it wasn't to be achieved? Would there have to be other policies considered if the VAR and voluntary redundancy and voluntary service wasn't enough contributors to that?
If I may, convener, so if it's difficult to implement the decision of the council in relation to any budget saving. We'll be monitoring all of those through the regular revenue monitoring. That would come back to the committee with any recommendations for corrective action, regardless of what decision the council makes, convener. And it may be that we've got to take action in light of any saving that can't be achieved.
Okay, thanks for that. Billy Scott.
I'd like to also ask a question on the devolved school budget. Given that the bulk of the funding is spent on teachers and support staff, and I think back to 2019-20 when there was a 3% cut in this budget and there were issues with teacher numbers and curriculum delivery, I just wondered what the situation will be this time in respect of teaching staff and whether the curriculum can still continue to be delivered.
This is me.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Bailey Scott, for the question. Yes, obviously, as we make our contribution towards balanced budget, we think it's important that central officers don't make the decisions across our schools, that head teachers are empowered to use their budget, which is devolved to meet the needs of their own local context. And so head teachers have that authority to do that, and so they will decide, depending on what's needed in their own schools, and how they will make those savings. And it could be across all of the resources, any of the resources. And as I said, we would work with our central team to look at how we monitor that and how we quality assure what their decisions are in case there are any unintended consequences or any challenges that they need support with. And we would use our central resources to support that.
Okay, thanks. Billy Keenan, please.
Yeah. Just to say that I agree with the leader of the council that we shouldn't have compulsory redundancies. We obviously put a phasing of the jobs that would be lost through the 100 that was proposed by officers that they could manage. Slightly different for the administration. However, there is over £3 million worth when you look at the revenue account that is a year saving as suggested by the Labour group. Can I ask officers in the administration's budget, Saved by the Bell appears to be there in its second year. Can I ask how many for that 51,000 jobs, part-time jobs, will be lost?
Andrew?
There's 5 part-time posts that ranges from 10 hours to 25 hours.
Right, that was 5 part-time jobs for 51,000. Okay, thank you.
You will note that saving is not for a further year. Councillor Crichton, please.
Thank you, convener. My question is in regards to the cultural organisations and the proposed cut in other budgets of £6,000 to £8,000. We, in our budget, we don't think this is needed, but the financial challenges facing the sector have been highlighted by the Dundee Rep and the DCA. And my question is, I'm just wondering if officers have spoken to those organisations and Dundee Science Centre about the possibility of the impacts of this cut in support from the City Council.
So we have annual process where we gather information from each of the organisations, and during that process where we think there are going to be reductions, we ask about impacts. So we have had information back from them about how they would deal with their ongoing challenges. At the time, they didn't know what their Creative Scotland funding would be, particularly for the Rep and DCA. So they've now seen significant increases in their funding via that. And we've also had discussions about what other revenue or other means they could use to plug that gap. And obviously, as part of any discussions going forward after this meeting, we'll have a discussion about how they mitigate impacts for particularly any protected characteristic groups as well. So we would want them to keep that to a very minimum. And some of the impacts are around young people, and we've had some of those discussions as well.
Many thanks.
Councillor Duncan, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you. My question regards the proposals, not from ourselves but from others, to reduce the opening hours of Broughty Ferry Castle Museum to a seasonal basis. Now, that indicates to me that there's the likelihood, indeed probably the certainty, that the castle will therefore be left unstaffed for extended periods of time, which to me raises questions of security concern, such as intruders or burst pipes, etc. Can I just ask what consideration has been given to keeping an eye on the castle if it were to be shut for any time, and who would pick up the cost of that?
Mrs. Dobie.
Thank you for the question. We would put in place the operation that we have at the moment, that is, we make sure that our buildings that we manage on behalf of the council are subject to regular checks. That would continue during the winter periods.
Thanks for that. Councillor Coleman, please.
One of the budget proposals before us is axing the council's contribution towards the Dundee to London Public Service Obligation funding. Report 872025 makes clear that it's unlikely that the financial support from the UK and Scottish governments would be available should the council withdraw its share. Locanair has indicated as well that if the PSO was ended with withdrawal of subsidy, the airline would cease to operate the service. Given this would essentially end the viability of Dundee Airport, could officers please give an indication of the economic impact on the city and wider region of the city no longer having commercial flights and no airport would this essentially be a runway to nowhere?
Mr. Hamilton, please.
Thank you. There was an economic impact assessment undertaken in 2019 into the impact of Dundee Airport, and it found that there are 170 full-time equivalent jobs supported in the Tay Cities region by the airport. That includes those directly employed at Dundee Airport and Loganair, so there would be a significant impact on jobs directly. It also found that the impact of the PSO was generating £12.3 million for the region in the year, including direct economic benefits and those associated with inbound tourism.
Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton, perhaps if I could ask a supplementary to that. Been in the council long enough to remember when council ran the airport before it got transferred to Hyle back in 2007, 2008, I think. If the airport were to close, what financial liability might come back to the council?
Convener, there is a lease in place between the council and Highlands and Islands airports to operate the Dundee Airport. The only scheduled service that currently operates is the Dundee to London service, and that then supports services that operate to Kirkwall and Sunborough during the summer period. If the PSO stopped, there is a question over what the future of Dundee Airport would be, and were Dundee Airport to close, the land would revert to the council. Decisions regarding what would happen in that situation would need to be made, but there are clauses, I understand, within the lease that may require the repayment of any subsidy that Transport Scotland has given to the airport over the period where the land at Dundee Airport to be disposed of for any commercial reason.
Thanks for that. So it's not quite as simple as one line in a budget. Councillor Toland, please.
Yeah, it's a follow-on from the PSO. I mean, the economic impact assessment, of course, suggests that there would be 170 local job losses, 180 across Scotland. I'm assuming that there wouldn't be a voluntary redundancy programme here and that these would be basically a payoff situation, and so compulsory redundancies would come in. Can you clarify what the situation of that job situation would be, please?
Mr. Hamilton.
I don't think it's possible for us to comment on the position with organisations outside of the council regarding their employment arrangements.
Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, returning to that issue of the workforce management and the 100 reduction in posts that's proposed. Just concerned about this, and obviously we've had an answer, but just for clarification, the longer in the year this takes, the more the pressure on the council budget going forward. Am I understanding that correctly? So even if all the posts were achieved, if it's spread out over that year, it has a much greater impact than if it happens immediately, and that would put pressure on the budget.
Remit.
Thanks, convener. So I think that the sooner and the greater the saving we have to achieve, the more pressure we have. If we don't have the posts, then clearly we'll have to be looking at the services that we provide from within them. So, you know, if there was no saving to be taken, that would obviously be the easiest to implement. If we look for 4.5 million, that's obviously going to require more work. As I've said before, we believe it can be done, but it's about the pressure and the impact and the risk associated with it, convener.
Thanks. Can I ask, in both the Liberal Democrat and Labour group amendments, there's a great huge list of various bits and pieces, repairs and maintenance, equipment and furniture, books, educational materials, catering and hospitality, materials, consumables. And presumably these figures in the provisional revenue budget have been reached after a bit of consideration from management as to what they need to spend to make their departments work. And can we simply just go through and slash off bits and pieces and expect everything to be fine? I mean, I'm seeing, I don't have the revenue budget to hand, but page 11, equipment and furniture, a reduction of 150,000. Page 10, equipment and furniture, a reduction of 120,000. Page 12, 50,000. I mean, these soon add up, and are our staff going to have desks and chairs to sit at?
Convener, the budget volumes prepared by consulting with officers on what's required to deliver the services in the year ahead. When we've looked at proposals to reduce that, we've looked at what can competently be reduced from the budget. But clearly, if the budget is eroded to an excessive extent, then there'll be a risk to the interruption of service or the long-term impact. So if furniture isn't replaced year after year, then eventually there will become a problem with supply of it. So I would suggest that it would expose the council to a greater level of risk, depending on the amount that is taken from the budget and the period over which it is taken, convener.
Thanks for that. I visited Verdant Works recently, and there's a section replicating I think late 1800s office where it's very high desks and there were no chairs. So perhaps people were suggesting we revert back to that situation. But anyway, Councillor Flynn.
That's good. I just follow up on Liberal Democrats one with regards to the reduction in non-statutory training and learning budget of a quite substantial sum of 180,000. Could I maybe get some more feedback from officers on what the impact that would have on staff training, for example, and their capabilities for performing CPD and can qualify for their duties, and the ongoing training issues that might be caused by the reduction in training for their jobs?
Mr. Emmett, please.
So thanks, convener. I suppose similar to the last item, then this is not a compulsory or statutory spend, but investing in our workforce is important in terms of future skills and making sure people maintained with skills. So I suppose it represents, if it wasn't retained, it would represent a risk. But again, it could be not retained. There's no statutory requirement to retain it in the budget, so it's competent to consider removal of it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Shears, please.
Thanks very much. In the administration budget, I note a reduction in civic activities, not the full amount taken, but 13,000. Just wondering if officers could give us an overview of what activities would be at risk if this money was to be taken.
Remaining, is it one for yourself, please?
Thank you, convener. At this stage, no decisions have been made regarding that, but options which would be available to the council would be no longer serving alcoholic drink at civic events, serving non-alcoholic drink instead, and reducing the amount of civic events that are held.
Okay, Councillor Short, please.
Thank you, convener. There's within the Lib Dem budget a section that says income from joint boards for the provisional professional services 45k, which I presume means that we would remove the support that we give to people like the Tay Road Bridge Joint Valuation Board, and the Teesside contracts. And I just wondered what kind of impact that would have on reputationally with regards to where we supply, and as I say, it is an income, but it's also reputational damage, I would imagine, if we were to remove that.
Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So I can confirm this saving would be in relation to raising income from the joint boards in relation to the provision of professional services that we provide on their behalf. Whilst it's competent to propose it, we would need to have a discussion with the relevant joint boards in terms of agreeing the charge for these services in advance.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Convener. I could see that in the Liberal Democrat motion, they are talking about appointing 14 new full-time members of staff permanently. So I'm just wondering if officers have received any indication from the Liberal Democrats about which jobs they want to cut and which jobs they want to save, since we seem to be creating new jobs in one area while still insisting that we're going to get rid of 100 jobs in 12 months. Is there some inherent contradiction here when you're increasing posts while reducing other posts?
I'm not sure.
Would it make it more difficult to achieve if we're increasing posts at the same time?
On the one hand, we're cutting jobs, on the other hand, we're increasing jobs. Yes, that's somewhat contradictory. Mr. Emmett?
So I'm not sure if that's a comment or a question, Convener, but the proposal sets out what the Liberal Democrat proposal is in relation to jobs. That would have to be set against the requirement to achieve savings through looking at posts, and I suppose it sets out a priority for that amendment in terms of where those jobs would want to be focused. We'd have to, if that was agreed, then we'd obviously have to look at how that was implemented.
Thanks. And as Councillor Flynn's pointed out, we'd be hiring new staff, but with no training budget to train them. So hopefully they come fully equipped to operate on day one as a countryside ranger or a forestry officer with no training. Now, not seeing any more indications of questions. Last chance. Okay. So if we could move into the formal situation, I'll obviously be moving the administration budget. My voice lost, I've got half a glass of water left. So I want to start by thanking everyone who took part in the recent budget consultation. Over 3,500 people and organisations took the time to complete the survey, a huge increase in last year, and their responses have helped to shape our spending priorities. That's just one of the ways we make sure people's views are heard. People decided which projects to support in the Dundee Climate Fund, which covers energy efficiency, active travel, reducing waste, improving biodiversity and increasing awareness of climate change. Already 22 projects have shared around £750,000 from the first and second rounds of the initiative. During the past year, we continued to make good progress in our three key priorities, namely to reducing child poverty and you hear me now? Okay. Possibly. I'm not starting at the beginning again. I'd got to economic growth, I think, and tackling climate change and reaching net zero emissions by 2045. On reducing poverty and inequalities, progress includes a package of £500,000 investment for projects tackling cost of living crisis, such as advice services, food provision, and places where people can get a warm welcome, and a campaign raising awareness of support available for those affected. Education is one of the keys to tackling inequality. More Dundee pupils are moving into positive destinations when they leave school, including those from the most deprived areas of the city. The past year also saw 4 youth groups receive a share of over £50,000 to develop the numeracy skills of younger people. A new employability approach for young people has been launched, with data showing that Dundee achieved the greatest increase of 16 to 19-year-olds in education, employment or training in the last year. Over £1 million has been put into the pockets of Dundee pensioners thanks to a citywide campaign to encourage people to apply for pension credit. The Council, along with the Citizens Advice Bureau and Brooksbank, work to maximise the income of as many Dundee pensioners as possible. The average pension credit award was £63.51 a week, making a real difference to the lives of older Dundonians. Dundee is one of the best areas in Scotland for progress in implementing standards to provide care for people affected by drug and alcohol use. People now have fast access to treatment, a choice of medication prescribed to them, alongside support to remain in treatment for as long as required. Dundee's Year of Kindness is a 2025 initiative to reduce the stigma faced by people who use substances. The initiative will celebrate people and projects that support the community through kindness, compassion and hope. Almost 1,000 people, either homeless or facing the prospect of losing their home, were rehoused by Dundee City Council last year. The council met its statutory duty in 100% of those cases, and it continues to work to tackle the ongoing challenges posed by homelessness. These efforts include bringing over 130 empty homes back into use. The living wage movement continues to have a high profile in the city. During the annual Living Wage Week, it was revealed that there are over 125 living wage accredited employers headquartered in Dundee, collectively employing over 42,000 workers. The Dundee Promise is having a positive impact in supporting vulnerable children and young people, while the Dundee Carer Involvement Framework sets out how carers in Dundee will have their voices heard, influencing decision-making in the future. On delivering inclusive economic growth, examples include work on James Thompson House, a £26 million waterfront development providing over 50,000 square feet of Grade A office accommodation and completed this year. Community wealth building helps bolster the Dundee economy and support local jobs. Efforts to encourage local firms resulted in over £24 million being spent locally. Dundee was last year the first city in Scotland to develop the use of the Loves Local gift card to create a product specifically for tourists. Organised by the council, it brought together businesses and organisations in the tourism sector to launch an innovative and exciting product. The evolution of the Mitchell and Scotland Innovation Park continues. This groundbreaking partnership has delivered an innovation hub, a skills academy, an accelerator programme, a home for startups and numerous local job opportunities. The transition of ownership in January is set to deliver a potential increased workforce of up to 600 and also an estimated £50 million investment in cutting-edge infrastructure, technology and development. Funding from the Business Loans Scotland scheme is being used to bolster the city's life sciences sector. The opening of the Dundee Life Sciences Innovation Hub this year will assist in generating innovative research into commercial opportunities and jobs. Tackling climate change, we've continued the transformation of the Bell Street multi-storey car park into a green transport hub. Other developments include the Broughty Ferry to Monifleet active travel corridor and the installation of cycle storage facilities. Our local heat and energy efficiency strategy has identified opportunities for heat networks to decarbonise heat and improve energy efficiency in the city's buildings, with 5 heat network zones identified. This is helping us to meet our climate and net zero commitments, reducing heating costs and improving health and well-being. Our first ever local area energy plan sets out a vision of what a net zero carbon energy system could look like and how the city can deliver its 2045 net zero target. We're one of the first local authorities in Scotland to produce such a plan. Air quality in Dundee has met all of the targets set in 10 locations where it is continuously monitored across the city. Enforcement has begun in the past year on Dundee's low emission zone, benefiting children, older people, those with existing underlying health problems, and everyone who breathes in cleaner air. Dundee City Council won a number of national awards for its use of electric vehicles and drive to net zero, van decarbonisation, infrastructure strategy, accessible strategy, and our public sector fleet. A focus on biodiversity has seen the planting of trees, creation of grasslands and meadows, and a range of other actions. £171,000 from the Scottish Government's Nature Restoration Fund is helping to halt biodiversity decline and improving nature networks. The Take Pride in Your City campaign is making a difference to our communities with 130 litter picks, tackling fly tipping, and nearly £700,000 Scottish Government funding for upgrades to Moldovia and Riverside recycling centres. The capital plan we approved earlier this month will see investment of nearly £300 million in the city over the next 5 years, including investment in the school estate, notably in the completion of the £100 million East End Community Campus, set to open in just a few months' time. Built to meet Passive House certification standard, the building is highly insulated, airtight and well ventilated, ensuring a sustainable, low-carbon, energy-efficient community campus. Sustainability is a key focus for the council, with the investment of £74 million in tackling climate change, making up nearly a quarter of the capital plan. This includes energy efficiency measures and council housing. We have a long-term investment programme for our housing stock that will aim to ensure these properties are as energy efficient as possible, delivering benefits for both tenants and the climate. This will be delivered by ensuring these homes meet the government energy efficiency standards. We continue to work with partners on the long-term regeneration of the city to stimulate growth and investment and to maximise the impact of the Tay-Cities region deal and emerging projects such as the Eden project, the Life Sciences Innovation District and the Abertay Cyber Quarter. To build on the achievements of the past year, the budget being proposed today will ensure that the council remains financially sustainable while using the resources available to continue to improve outcomes for our citizens. As in previous years, the administration has tried to minimise the impact of any savings through prudent financial management and efficiencies. By doing so, we have significantly reduced the requirement for more difficult savings decisions. We're also taking advantage of new monies from the Scottish Government, notably including £3.7 million for the Dundee Integrated Joint Board to fund the real living wage and increases in the cost of free personal care. £800,000 for social care staff working in children's services and £400,000 for the expansion of free school meals for primary 6 and primary 7 school children. Again, published our budget proposal in advance of today's meeting, giving members, employees, trade unions and the public the opportunity to review our proposals. We've been open about the challenges we face. The administration believes that the budget proposals we're submitting today represent the best way to protect public services and maintain our investment in the city's priorities, reducing poverty and inequality, delivering inclusive economic growth and tackling climate change. The budget includes an 8% increase in council tax, which we believe is needed to maintain essential services and protect vulnerable residents. After allowing for the savings proposed this afternoon, our spending proposals for the next year amount to over £493 million. This expenditure will deliver vital public services for the people of Dundee and fund our plans for investment. I now submit to committee the administration's 2025-26 revenue budget and council tax. Now, I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Convener. Just want to start by saying that the past 4 months have been an absolute whirlwind for me because I was straight elected and then straight into the budget process. A process of many ups and downs and dealing with the movable force that is a council budget. However, in between time, I have spent every single day with the community of Lochee, a community of strong, dedicated, compassionate people who give their time to better enhance the lives of their neighbours. And it is also important to note that it's a council ward widely run by strong women. This budget provides them stability to continue their work through the continued funding for the community regeneration, continued support to the food network in Dundee, which provides essential funding to help those in need. It's continued funding for welfare rights and projects such as the Brooksbank Centre and Dundee Citizen Advice, who maximise income for their service users. It's continued support to the Dundee and Women's International Centres which promote our city's multiculturalism. These are just a few examples of the continued support from our administration. This is a budget which protects the vulnerable within the city. And all of this with the added pressure of the 15 years of austerity, and let's not forget the new employer's national insurance hike. So I am extremely happy to support this motion.
Thanks for that. Bill Keenan, you have an amendment.
Yep, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank officers for the effort they've put in budget, and obviously I'd have to say it's really regrettable that I find we're in this budget situation making these level of cuts given the amount of money that the Scottish Government has received this time from Westminster. Biggest single settlement they've ever had.
And I thought with this year we would be looking at a growth budget and know this level of cuts. So that in itself is quite regrettable. And the cuts that are in the budget that I've got here are unpleasant. And you've obviously asked questions of officers trying to make the most political gain you can out of them. I'm quite happy to defend the cuts that we've put in into this budget. Things like Brooksbank, the Community Regeneration Fund are in our budget. We're intending to keep these, in particular, these areas and what they deliver for the city. And Regeneration Fund, at 58% of that is spent on youth work in the city and youth reversionary work is to be recommended. And that's ordinary people that are making a decision about what they want in their community. And I think it'd be wrong to cut that budget. But I will say that, you know, the real issue that we have as a council, that we are facing as a council, is the fact that budgets are cut to the extent, and the health and social care budget, we know, and the chair is in the room, and he knows that the health and social care budget needs to be cut, but 19.7 million for them to break even. And the intention is to use up endless amounts of their reserves to get there. Many times when I've been in this chamber and tried to use reserves, the administration tried to laugh that off the park about using one-off money to solve problems. It's so much so that they were voting down education money, what I believe would have made a difference in that 1 year even to children in our schools. But, you know, we'll wait again to see the chair of the IJB voting down the fact that we're putting in our budget 1,000 additional hours per week to health and social care, 52,000 hours over the year. And the health and social care's intention is to cut even more than that. They're out to consultation on these things. So, you know, I'm hoping that that's the bit and the shared risk that you know, and everybody in this chamber knows exists, will just come back and bite you if we didn't put the money in there. I'd be hoping that you would see fit to support our budget. We've set aside £500,000 for food banks and clothes, because we realised that that is a vital in the city. It's a vital resource in the city. We've laid aside the money to pay the rent where these organisations rent a building from council. So next year they would have that rent free. We're looking at additional borrowing of 55,000, so as to deliver £1 million worth of capital to deliver energy efficient things like solar panels, perhaps on the Douglas Sports Centre, Douglas Community Centre. That way, making it viable and taking it off the hit list that the administration's got for closure. Broughty Ferry Castle, a summer opening, which the people in Broughty Ferry were clearly shouting out for. It's only but with indulgence in the budget. The rest is just hard facts, things that are needed in the city. That health and social care budget needs propped up more than that, and everybody in this chamber knows that. And move our budget with a 5% increase in tax. You know, so for no effect in people's households' budget to the extent the administration intended.
Councillor Cruikshank, second, please.
Thank you, convener. Second in the Labour group budget. I have to say, year after year, it's cuts, cuts, cuts. And no doubt you would have heard the demonstration downstairs saying no to cuts. I sincerely wish I could say no to cuts. But the law dictates that we have to provide. But there's one thing I would say, if the 100 posts that are being lost, we've taken that as advised by the council's own budget. I get complaints constantly. people cannot remember the last time they've seen a road sweeper, a street sweeper in their locality, bins overflowing. We have no idea of what these 100 posts are. We have asked the questions, but we weren't given a breakdown of what the posts were. On Monday, pardon? I can't hear. Yeah, I know that's what I said. We took it from their budget. So maybe I didn't make myself clear. Come Monday, we've got the revenue budget, which states there's a 3 million pounds of savings due to unfilled posts, slippage, whatever they call it. Is that in addition to the 100 posts, or is that included in the 100 posts? But this could have all been mitigated if we hadn't had the debacle of the Olympia, 6.5 million, the roofs, 4.5 million. There's 11 million altogether, and we've had to make 10 million pounds of cuts. We didn't need to do this. And the last thing I would say is that the Scottish Government has received the largest ever financial payment from a UK Westminster Government, and I half expected that they wouldn't have to make these cuts as deep as they are. I second the Labour budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cruikshank. It's probably worth at this juncture pointing out that our bill for the increase in employers' national insurance of £7 million actually outweighs the income that's being brought in by the administration's council tax rise. So let's just have things in perspective, please. Councillor Lynn, please.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Councillor Keenan's referred to me a number of times during his speech, which is kind of unfortunate because our budget meeting isn't until the 26th of March. It's a completely separate process. What I do know in the Labour budget proposals are that they're proposing to put 1.18 million into the Health and Social Care Partnership. Now, one of the major headaches that we have, along with every other IJB in Scotland, is the hike in employers' national insurance contributions. That's a major pressure in Dundee. It's a major pressure across Scotland. So I'd like to know, given that Labour are proposing to put 1.18 million into the HSCP budget, I'd like to know if someone could tell me what the total pressures are on the budget as a result of this ENIC hike, because by my reckoning, it's substantially more than 1.18 million. Someone could perhaps answer that.
Would you like me to answer?
So, Councillor Bailey Keenan, I'm sure other members of your group can take the opportunity to answer in due course.
Should hear me think about it yourself. He's the chair.
Indeed, and perhaps, well, anyway. Bailey Scott, you're next, please.
Well, Convener, this is the 8th budget meeting I've attended in my 2 terms as the only Conservative councillor. And on 6 times of those 8 occasions, I've moved an amendment to your budget. But as a single councillor, with the change in the way that the budget setting process now operates, it's difficult for a single councillor to produce a full council budget from scratch. So what I have to do today is to look at the 3 proposals in front of me and decide on a course of action. And there are some things in all 3 of them that I can support, in particular Brody Castle Museum. I'm really pleased to see that that is going to remain open. The castle is the anchor in Brody Ferry's visitor offering, and it should never have been considered for closure. And the actions that have been itemised in the report that accompanies the agenda, that they're welcome, but it should never have taken the prospect of closing the castle for these actions to have come forward. It's something Leisure and Culture Dundee should have been doing all this time to maximise the revenue that can come from the castle. And hopefully we'll get back to it being open full time as well. I have concerns about the devolved school budget and the reduction of 1%, and I raised that in a question to the head of department, and hasn't reduced those concerns. I also note in your own budget proposals that you're remitting the chief executive to undertake a review of the implications of a new transient visitor tax levy. Well, I'm opposed to that, and I'm concerned about the impact it would have on the tourist spend on hospitality and leisure. And I hope that the review, when it is carried out, takes account of the impact on businesses and the visitor economy, and not just focusing on the revenue it might raise. Scottish taxpayers are already paying the highest level of tax in the United Kingdom, and yet despite that, the services that we get continue to be cut, and all the key indicators show that nothing works in Scotland in the way it should be working, and local government continues to be underfunded by the Scottish Government. And today you're about to hit Dundee council taxpayers with the biggest increase in council tax in a generation. So in coming to a view on what course of action to take today, despite the reservations about some of the proposals, I'm going to support those budget. When it comes to voting, I'm going to support the budgets with the lowest council tax increase. And on this occasion, on this division, it's the Labour group that has the lowest council tax increase, and I'll be supporting their budget.
Thank you for that contribution. Councillor Rome, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not sure where to start. I'll see how we get on, but I've heard a couple of worrying things from the Labour group today. A lot of mention of one-off spending somehow preventing us from doing future investment. This rhetorical gap between what was one-off spending and recurring spending, I think, is a worrying feature. You yourself, Convener, highlighted the problems with the national insurance increases, the effect that has on jobs, and the lack of mitigation for that affecting the wider health service as well as charities. And I think that's not been talked about enough, is the impact of that on the third sector. I'm confused how we can talk about the Labour group being the party of the workers and the party that are supporting a lack of cuts when they want to get rid of jobs post twice as fast as the administration is proposing. I find that very strange, given that the reason for these cuts, as you yourself have highlighted, is that the national insurance contributions increase is actually higher than the rate of council tax. I'm extremely concerned, and I think most Dundonians know that Dundee Council faces the same tax rise implications as families do. To simply pretend that the inflation we've seen in the last year, the highest in 40 years, didn't happen, I think would be both dangerous and irresponsible. Council tax increases, like inflation, are cumulative, but we could put a populist, very low increase forward. However, as you yourself have said, we've sought to safeguard our ability to deliver key statutory and not statutory services such as food banks, as Councillor Mills and others have highlighted, going forward. I think as the administration group, we have a duty to the public to make sure we have the funds and staff in place to deliver services, bid for external funding, and continue to improve our infrastructure, our economy, and our quality of life. After all, it is officers that deliver these services on behalf of the council and the administration. And I'm concerned that if we move too quickly on this, then we lose that ability to bid for external monies that allow us to deliver the improvements that we all want to see. As I say, an artificial low increase, while it looks great on paper, limits our ability to do this going forward and to make the continuous improvements we all want to see. So I'm very concerned about some of the comments and I hope that we can pass the administration's budget.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Anderson, please.
Thank you, Convener. I just want to talk a little bit more about why we're in the situation we're in. Back in the end of October last year, Rachel Reeves, the new Labour Chancellor, dropped a bombshell. She said she was increasing the rate of national insurance contributions that employers had to pay from 13.8% to 15%. And she reduced the threshold that these payments were due from £9,000 a year to £5,000 a year. This was meant to be a very clever wheeze to protect Labour's protection pledge that they weren't going to put up taxes, but actually it's a very sleek tax on jobs because it's specifically making it harder for employers to pay people for their work. The Office of Budget Responsibility said that this increase in taxes, this overt increase in taxes increases the payroll across the country for employers by around 2%. And when the cost of employing people goes up, employers have two choices. They either increase prices or lower wages. Whatever you do, It costs more to run a business, so your profit margin reduces and investment contracts. Not exactly a smart idea for a government who said they were about economic growth. The big impact of this increase is in our council and across the social, the care workers, the retail workers, the hospitality workers, who are now all at a greater risk of unemployment because of Rachel Reeves thinking that she was being clever. In terms of the public sector in Scotland, the impact was staggering. Local government in Scotland got a direct bill of £240 million extra. And the whole of the public sector in Scotland, when you include the police, the NHS, the care workers, were facing an extra bill of £700 million. And that £700 million extra cost delivers absolutely nothing, zero. It doesn't help a single person get home from hospital sooner. It doesn't support a single person who can't heat their home or feed their family. It doesn't provide a single nursery place or empty an extra bin. It's just a huge additional cost on the public sector for absolutely nothing in return. All because Rachel Reeves thought she was being clever. Now, when the scale of the damage was clear, our Cabinet Secretary immediately said that this increase in costs to the public sector had to be met in full. There's been a bit of a dance, and actually we've now been shortchanged by up to 40%. That's because the public sector in Scotland is larger and our staff are better paid. So when we have to rely on Barnett consequentials, we don't get the actual cost. We've now been very lucky that the Cabinet Secretary has given local government and the public sector 60% of these unnecessary additional costs, but it's leaving us 40% short. Labour shortchanged the pensioners, they've shortchanged the WASPy women, they've shortchanged families living in poverty, and they're now shortchanging the public sector and councils in Scotland. So let's be clear. The cost to Dundee City Council is £7 million. When you actually work that out, it's equivalent to 4% of the council tax increase that we're having to fund. So when we're actually having to ask people in Dundee to pay extra, they should be conscious of the fact that part of the reason why they're having to pay so much extra is there's been an astronomical bill landed at the foot of local government in Scotland, and we're all having to pay the price.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Short now, please.
I was very excited on the 4th of July, as I always am. I love an Independence Day. One day I'll have my own for Scotland. And I thought, yes, we're going to have some socialists in number 10. And first of all, they came for your granny. And then they came for your jobs. And next, they're going to come for the benefits. And we've heard that the Scottish Government have put forward the most bumper amount of money that's ever been offered for a generation. However, as my colleagues have said, it's the caveats that have basically tied our arms behind our back, as always. Director Bailey Scott talked about the fact that he would support those who were putting up their least, and he wasn't particularly happy about what was going on in Scotland. But believe you me, the panic that's happening down in England that I learned through my APSI colleagues is even worse. They're facing devolvement of their councils in the face at the moment. So if we think it's rough up here, imagine if you took away that Scottish Government support and all the mitigation that they actually give us. And I will just leave on the fact that as a member of the Scottish National Party, I will for always be willing to put my hat on the table to say that if we were an independent country, as we should have been 11 years ago, we would not be facing the atrocities that we are facing today. We've got to live with it, but we can't stop talking about the alternative, because there is an alternative out there, and we shouldn't just take waves and waves of cutting us off at the knees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Short. I think that was Councillor Crichton nodding his head in agreement with you, perhaps. Councillor McHugh, you're next, please.
Thank you. Try and bring us back to what we're here to discuss today, the budget for Dundee City Council. And to do that, I'd like to draw your attention to the last line of the Labour amendment investment proposals. Alongside Councillors Lynn and Toland, I sit on the Integration Joint Board for Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership. And I'm acutely aware, and I hope all of you here are as well, that the partnership faces a shortfall, a huge shortfall for 25-26 of around 20 million. So some very difficult decisions will need to be made at the IJB budget meeting on the 26th of March, already alluded to by Councillor Lynn. Among the proposals being considered is a significant cut in provision for home care packages, the service that allows people to leave hospital when they're ready to and receive the ongoing care that they need at home, or to avoid going into hospital in the first place. During 24-25, Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership managed to reduce delayed discharges from hospital to almost zero at the end of the year by resourcing social care packages. A huge achievement, and well done to the teams involved in that work. A real success story, restoring the comfort of home to many older people in particular, and freeing up much needed hospital beds at the same time. The Labour Group budget includes a proposal to fund 1,000 hours of home care per week during 25-26. This won't solve the problem of a cut in the provision of home care packages, but it will lessen the impact and could make all the difference to you, to your mum or your granddad. I commend the Labour Group budget to you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Shears now, please.
Thanks very much. And before I start, I was going to say, I'd just like to pick up on something Councillor Short said. The Scottish Government's on white papers said there would be massive austerity to pay for independence. So let's not pretend that they said anything else. But again, just to set the context of this budget, it comes off the back of the Scottish Government getting the biggest ever settlement since devolution. And we'll keep banging that drum because the Labour government delivered that just 6 months after 15 years of the Tories and the Lib Dems in the first few years attacking public spending. But we're still sitting here in February debating cuts. And as we thought, the administration will gladly have everyone believe that all these cuts are the fault of someone else. Bogeyman this year being national insurance, which I'll come back to later. I'm not going to add on too much to that debate. I think enough has been said and we all disagree. But I would like to draw attention to the independent Scottish Fiscal Commission report in August. One line which I will directly quote: Scottish Government's own decisions are to blame for much of the pressure facing the country's finances. And then we come to council tax, and I do find it quite funny that the administration is raging against the national insurance tax when they are putting up the most regressive tax that we have by 8%. So under a media wave of looking out for communities, you're raising a tax that hits the poorest hardest by 8% and delivering very little for it. And let's not forget, it was the SNP that promised to abolish council tax in 2009. But instead of doing that, the Scottish Government, propped up by the Greens at times, continually froze council tax while budgets and services were being decimated. We never had the power to raise council tax in small increments, and now people get hit with this big whack. And the most embarrassing one being the back of a fag packet deal when a failing First Minister desperately tried to cling to power, and even Cosler went aware it was coming. And again, as Councillor Cruikshank mentioned, the administration does have some blame. We've got 6 million repair scandal in the Olympia, which they still refuse to hold a public inquiry in. Certainly there's a small one. They refuse to hold a longer one into the full farce. 4.4 million on the roofs. And now we're seeing another 500,000 on cladding that wasn't fitted in properly, as I read in the paper. That's £11 million out of the public purse. £11 million. So while the administration certainly likes to sing the praises of the Scottish Government, they take zero responsibility and hide from accountability about the state of the city's finances and the decisions that have been made by their own party that have contributed to it. This budget is pay more, get less. Our budget takes less out of people's pockets, it protects the city's most vulnerable, and delivers more investment. do the right thing, accept our amendment and deliver a better future for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shears. And in your quote from the IFS report, I'm not sure if you're criticising the Scottish Government's pay settlements, which are higher than the rest of the UK, thus ensuring our staff are better paid, or you're criticising increased spending on social security with initiatives such as the Scottish Child Payment, which has been recognised as a game changer for lifting people out of poverty. But there you go. Councillor.
Thank you, Convener. So first of all, just thank officers for all the work that they've done putting this budget together. I know the budget process is always difficult because the Scottish Government settlement doesn't come just before Christmas, and officers have to work really hard over the Christmas period to make sense of that and put together proposals for all groups. So I really appreciate all the work that all the officers have done to get us to this stage. I'm going to make a general comment, which I wasn't going to until some of the recent comments, and then a more substantive comment about some of the things that are in other parties' budgets. We hear again that this is the greatest budget that the Scottish Government has ever received. Let's put that into context. The real terms cut to the Scottish budget since 2020 is £6 billion. So the money that's been put back in doesn't even get us back to where we were in real terms in 2020. So I think that needs to be recognised. Also, how much greater it would be for the public services if the Scottish Government didn't have to mitigate the bedroom tax. It would be good if Rachel Reeves got rid of that, but she hasn't got the guts to do it. It would be great if we didn't have to mitigate for the winter fuel payment that Labour brought in and then didn't give the Scottish Government the money when they devolved it. It would be great if the Scottish Government didn't have to mitigate for the 2-child cap, which again, Labour shamefully have not got rid of. And also, wouldn't it be great if the council didn't have to spend £16.9 million every year on PPP schools, because that was what the Labour previous administration brought in to build the schools, while at the same time giving the Westminster Exchequer £1 billion back because they couldn't think of enough things to spend money on in Scotland. So I think maybe there's a bit of context that needs to be put in place there. When I look at the budget proposals, every year the opposition groups always putting in something which they call various, where they just top slice off these budgets every year. I fully suspect that's where Elon Musk has got his idea for the UK government, which of course Anas Sarwar is now pledged to copy, which I think should worry all of us, especially when he said last week that he would probably cut funding to NHS boards, albeit he couldn't actually remember how many there was in Scotland. But when I look at the budget, it's always easy to say, oh, let's just take a £10,000 here, £10,000 there. But when you take £50,000 away from pupil transport, which both Labour and the Liberal Democrats do, which is 6.5% of that budget, when you take away the fact that some of that budget is statutory, that leaves you with unstatutory things, which we would have to then take that money from. What is that? That's transport for our ASN pupils to get them to school. Now, Billy Keenan might be quite happy to defend that cut. I think it's unconscionable to actually disadvantage our ASN pupils to get them to school. It might look good when you're going through a budget line and just cutting off money here and there, but that's the real effect of doing these kind of cuts without actually thinking about what the consequences are. I couldn't support that kind of budget, Convener. So on that basis, I'll be supporting you.
Thank you for these comments and putting things into a bit of context. Councillor Toland, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Stephen. Councillor Hunter has given some good context in this. And, you know, there's an element here from the Labour group that, you know, the SNP is the party of cuts. And it's easy to throw those allegations, and I can see Councillor Georgia nodding away to that. But let's just get a little bit of reality check and carrying on from Councillor Hunter as well. Scotland is set to have the lowest poverty levels across the UK, a full 5% lower than in England. Okay, so we're sitting at 24% and England is sitting at a poverty level of 29%. Now, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation's reaction, well, you can look who you want, but this is the Joseph Rowntree's reaction. This was their stat. The Joseph Rowntree's reaction to the UK Labour budget was that an extra 100,000 kids would be in poverty by 2029. So what we're actually seeing is not only an increase in child poverty, because of Labour Westminster decisions, but also an increase in inequality. In addition to that, Councillor Hunter has also raised the issue of us Scottish Government constantly having to mitigate various cuts done at Westminster level. We've got the 2-child cap, we've got the winter fuel payment. Just want to make a little bit of point on the 2-child cap, because this is about child poverty. There's two groups of people that will be impacted by the two-child cap. Apologies, 2-child cap will be children in families of 3 or more children, which is around about 1 in 2 children in those families will be worse off because of this. In addition to that, and I'm going to give you a little quote, Dr. Saraya Bai from the Equality Review says that if you don't scrap this 2-child cap, then basically the people that will be affected are largely comprised of the Black, Asian and ethnic minority children. So effectively what we've got are children being penalised because of this 2-child cap, which the Labour Party refused to remove. This is a terrible thing. So we can talk about cuts, but let's talk about the reality of Westminster cuts. Let's talk about the fact that children will be poorer as a result of those cuts. Now, the Child Poverty Action Group estimates that because we are mitigating that cut, an extra 15,000 children will be lifted out of poverty. The Scottish Fiscal Commission estimates that up to 42,000 children will benefit from the removal of that cut. So these are issues that the Scottish Government have to mitigate. And I'm going to talk about the child payment as well, because we talk about it a lot, but we do not, I think, promote the impact of the Scottish child payment a lot. The reason that child poverty is lower and is projected to get lower in Scotland is because of the child payment. That is the Joseph Rowntree Foundation tells us that, amongst other organisations. The Scottish child payment has an absolute integral impact in reducing child poverty. Now, we actually, this is classed as not on the margins support. This is classed as core fiscal policy to reduce poverty. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context here. Had the UK government implemented the Scottish child payment, it would have meant 4.2 billion investment in anti-child poverty measures. So what we've got is the UK Westminster government effectively telling us that they're going to do a study on child poverty, but we have evidence here and now that the Scottish government are managing to reduce poverty because of the Scottish child payment. That might be something that you guys want to take up with your party down in Westminster. The average family will be £770 worse off because of the UK budget. I'm not going to go massively into this, but I'm just going to say a few things about the third sector as well, and the national insurance contributions that you guys have done. Councillor Anderson, I think, did a very good outline on the impact that it has on employers, but the impact that national insurance hikes are having on the third sector are phenomenal. 75 million across Scotland. That's the charity sector are saying. The Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations are telling us that they're worried that they will be lost 75 million across Scotland. Just a little bit of context, by the way. It costs 21 million to run the Citizens Advice Bureau nationally. That's 3.5 Citizens Advice Bureaus that will be effectively lost because of that funding. I'm going to just finish up now, and I want to kind of raise the issue of our minorities and the poverty, the impact of poverty on this, because there's one thing I did notice that you guys have stripped, and that's the Equality and Diversity Fund. £6,000 has been taken out of that. Now, that might not seem much, but the social capital of that is vastly important. We're in a situation where our most vulnerable are now sitting without any recourse to funding. So I'm going to give you a little bit of example of some of the type of funding that the Equalities and Diversity Fund gave. One parent families Scotland gave a summer and food programme. Faith and Belief gave various different kind of community evenings and so forth. This is about.
Owen, can you wind up?
I'm going to wind up. Yeah, I'm just again. This is about inclusion. This is about inclusion. And what we've actually got is we're BAME community being disenfranchised because of things like the two-child payment, but locally you guys are also kind of removing that, removing the equality fund. So I'm just going to finish up and say, I think come back when you guys have a progressive system. I'm just going to finish up very quickly and just say, cancelling Christmas, that's just mean.
Thank you for these comments. We'll take Councillor Flynn, and he'll be the last speaker for the moment, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thanks very much, Convener, and it will come as no surprise, I'm sure, that I'll be supporting your budget proposals put before us tonight, or today, I should say. I think much has been said from my colleagues with regards to the historic debt this council carries with the PFI from Councillor Hunter, and all the other issues that the Labour governments have been, in recent years, have caused more issues than we expected. And not just between the Labour governments, the austerity brought upon us for the number of years by the Conservative Party, which has proven to be very, very detrimental, not just to this city, but the country as a whole. And I think it should be recognised. Now, like Councillor Short, expected a wee bit of a change. That was the word, wasn't it? That when Labour came in. But then we see pensioners being attacked, and I think to thank the officers within the council for supporting our pensioners to make sure they can claim as many benefits as they can to compensate for the challenge and the disgraceful challenge on the winter fuel allowance. It was absolutely despicable what was proposed there. Then we see the WASPE, then we see the refusal of the Labour Party to remove the two-child cap, keeping children in poverty. Councillor Tolan's touched upon that in a lot more detail. And I thank her for her comments, but I think it's really important to recognise. But what have we got from Councillor Anderson's comments put in front of us now? We've got employers' national insurance, a complete tax on jobs. And you can't deny this. This is the case. It's a tax on jobs, a tax on what this council is trying to do. Councillor Anderson much touched upon near £7 million added to the budget pressure we had, starting with 15.6 and there you go, 50% more. Thanks very much. I think that's absolutely despicable and unthought out extremely badly by, I would say, the UK government. And I think we've got to look at what Labour here are doing within the city. We're now making sure that they focus on removing 100 posts or even more than that, depending on how quickly they can get to the £4 million. I think that's absolutely despicable as well. A phased process, working with our staff is more important, not putting our staff under pressure or under threat, working with them. And I think that's what we should be focused on. We've got a very dedicated workforce and we should appreciate that, but we should work with them going forward to see how we can make the savings and put forward within our budget. I think touching upon many things, but I think I'll go back quickly to the Health and Social Care Partnership that Councillor McHugh touched upon. The saving of just over £1 million doesn't touch the sides when we talk about employers' national insurance. Now, you might not want to hear this, but employers' national insurance has an impact across every sector. Councillor Tones again touched upon the third sector, the impacts on that and the pressures that's going to put many under. And the many under would be, well, any go under. And that's your question you've got to ask yourself. And that'll be Labour's concerns and Labour's fault for that whole process. So our budget we've got put forward by yourself, Convener, is protecting the vulnerable in the city and our communities. We're supporting economic development, not ignoring it. We're making sure we can continue with city events, for example. Someone says taking away Christmas. Is that yourself, Councillor Tolan, just to remind them? I thought the Grinch was somewhere else, but obviously not. We're supporting our neighbourhoods and we're supporting our city. And I'll just finally touch upon jobs and the pressure that the Labour proposals has put on jobs. It's been touched upon by one of my colleagues as well, and that's the PSO. A total disregard of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to encourage employment within the city, the economic benefits of the city, and grow the city in a variety of ways. Taking the PSO away, I've just got to think to myself, is this an opportunity for you guys to be the fall guys in some respects? That it's maybe an insight from your branch office over on the West Coast, getting told by the UK Central Office that we don't want to pay to the PSO, so you guys fall for it, or take the fall for it, I should say. I think that's possibly the case. I don't know. But again, you've got to look at yourselves and see what your impact is. 170 plus jobs. So, convener, I'll be supporting your motion, and well, I'll leave it with yourself.
Thank you for these comments. And if we could go to the vote, please, Willie.
Thank you, convener. So the motion by Billy Saw, seconded by Councillor Mills, is as circulated. The amendment by Bailey Keenan, seconded by Councillor Cruikshank, is also circulated. Bailey Saws.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Black.
Motion.
Lord Provost Campbell.
Motion.
Deputy Lord Provost Cardell.
Motion.
Bailey Dawson.
A motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Lynn.
Motion.
Councillor Mills.
Motion, please.
Bailey Roberts.
Motion.
Councillor Rome.
Motion, please.
Councillor Short.
The motion, please.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Toland.
Motion.
Bailey Keenan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cruikshank.
Amendment.
Councillor Finnegan.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Amendment.
Councillor McKerven.
Amendment.
Councillor Scullen.
Amendment.
Councillor Shears.
The amendment.
Bailey Wright.
Amendment.
Bailey McPherson.
No vote.
Councillor Coleman.
No vote.
Councillor Crichton.
No vote.
Councillor Duncan.
No vote.
Bailey Scott.
Amendment.
That gives you 15 for the motion and 9 for the amendment. The motion is currently carried.
Okay, before we move on to the Lord Dem amendment, I think we'll take a short recess and come back at 4:05. Councillor Duncan, I believe you're moving the Liberal Democrat amendment.
That's correct, convener. I formally move the Liberal Democrat group budget proposals. And firstly, I'd just like to thank officers and corporate services for their support throughout the budget process, which has been really very much appreciated by us and I would imagine other members too. These proposals, we feel, give the right balance between maintaining the council tax increase as far as it is reasonably possible without deep, disastrous cuts to services. Many of the possible cuts proposals in the council's recent budget consultation were totally unacceptable, and our starting point was to listen to the feedback from Dundee residents in their concerns about many of these proposals. We totally reject any possible cuts to the education service. We certainly won't be shutting school swimming pools, and we also reject the possibility of cutting school budgets or removing vital school crossing patrollers. We will also avoid proposed increases to the school meals charges. The Lib Dem proposals would see a more modest council tax increase than many other councils across Scotland. We've heard quite a range recently from 8% up to 15%, I believe. I think that was in Orkney. So ours would be a more modest, just under 5%. In our proposals, we are also able to have some growth. For example, we would retain Broughty Ferry Castle Museum staying open all year. Leisure and Culture Dundee is now at last making more effort into promoting the museum and working with the community, in particular the Broughty Ferry Traders Association. I think the Castle Museum has the potential for an extremely bright future if it's given the correct funding and leadership, and it's time to build upon the offering that the museum, which is such an obvious asset, actually has to offer. I strongly believe that our budget amendment strikes the right chord, listening to the people of Dundee in their rejection of massive, unacceptable cuts to services whilst avoiding a very large council tax increase. I therefore move our budget amendment, and Councillor Crichton will second me.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Crichton, please.
Thank you, convener. I am pleased to second Councillor Duncan. I would start by stating I agree completely with his point that our amendment strikes the right balance between service provision and local tax charges. The Liberal Democrat budget proposal, in addition to council tax increase under 5%, also achieves savings to ensure we have a balanced budget. These include reducing purchases of furniture, car allowances, travel and promotion and marketing in some departments. We would remove the second civic vehicle, reduce hospitality budgets and axe alcohol purchases, and also accept officer proposals to review existing unfilled staff vacancies. In terms of avoiding the worst cuts, we also reject removing community funding. Indeed, we would continue to support Dundee's food network, whose team across the city undertake a vital work in helping those citizens in most need, maintaining the funding level at 500,000 for 25-26. We also oppose any cuts to community and cultural groups across, and we also rule out any cuts to community safety wardings or welfare support, including discretionary housing for those most in need. We also to some supported bus services. Our proposals would restore some supported bus services like the 204 in the West End and Lochee and 206 in Broughty Ferry and the sheltered shopping service, axed last year by this current. This was a cruel cut affecting our most elderly citizens disproportionately. We would also reduce, not increase, the garden waste charge and also reduce the bulky uplift charge. We also reject the proposal to move from fortnightly general waste bin collections to every 3 weeks. Our group has been very vocal about the cuts to the Council's environment services under this SNP administration, and we think cutting general waste bin collections would be a disaster for the city. We are also proposing more street cleaning posts and also have proposals on countryside ranger posts. We would also look to reduce or remove car parking proposed charges increased in the West End, choices. We have made the choice to make our streets cleaner and to provide Dundee to be more safer and to protect our cultural sector. I strongly support our budget amendment to the City Governance Committee, and thank you for letting me speak, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. Billy Wright, I see before we went to the recess, you'd indicated you were wanting to speak, but are you wanting to come in now, or? Okay, thank you for that. Billy Scott.
Thanks, Convener. I think I'll just make my position clear on the Liberal Democrat budget. But before I do so, I just wanted to make a comment on the observations made by Councillor Short and Councillor Toland in the last debate. But the constant blame and finger pointing at Westminster has really got a bit thin. And I think the Scottish Government has got the resources it needs. It just needs to manage them a bit better. But turning to the Liberal Democrat budget, as with your own budget and Labour budget, there's things in it I can support and things I can't support. Of course, I'm pleased to see all the Broughty Ferry issues featuring the Liberal Democrat budget again. And I think they were right to highlight the increase in parking charges, because the administration does seem to have taken a 10% increase across the board rather than looking at the individual circumstances. So I can support that. And I think they're also right to highlight the special collections and the additional charge on the brown garden waste bin, because that may have the potential to see an increase in fly tipping. So I can support that. Do have some concerns though about the whole list of cuts that they've got from the various departments, particularly in relation to equipment and furniture and books, materials and so on. But it may well be that the reduction in their headcount won't require as much furniture and equipment. They're also the only group to have selected the waste and recycle collection frequencies as a saving in their budget. And I'm not all that happy to see that they're continuing with the weekly food waste going from a weekly to fortnightly. I think that's a mistake. But again, back to my main point, Convener, that while we have inflation rising again, energy bills are going to be going up by 6.4% in April. I think families are under a lot of financial pressure. So as I did at the previous debate, when it comes to deciding which budget to support, I'll be supporting the one that has the lowest increase in council tax.
Thank you, Bailey Scott. Councillor Coleman, please.
Our group strongly oppose the current administration group's decision to close Care Park Golf Course, and our budget amendment would reverse that closure. The council has had some approaches from commercial organisations to partner with the council and Leisure and Culture Dundee to keep the golf course open in the long term. So for us, to enable these discussions to progress, we are proposing funding the golf course in 25-26 rather than seeing it close in the next few weeks. We have seen just what happens at Camperdown when former golf courses are left to become overgrown and a mess. It just ends up getting left and attracts little interest. Following through with the decision to close the course in April would mean far more private investment probably to get the course back to a playable condition, which would quite possibly put anybody off investing in it and end any credible interest. Also, we propose additional funding for road surfacing of £1 million and £500,000 for pavement improvements. I am in frequent correspondence, and I'm sure members are across the chamber, with constituents about the state of their roads and pavements. The Liberal Democrat budget proposals, in addition to a council tax increase of under 5%, also achieve savings to ensure a balanced budget. The last 16 years, we have seen under the current administration's watch continual cuts to local services compounded by the constant underfunding local government budgets from successive Scottish governments. But in addition, this year's miserable budgetary situation has been compounded by the Labour's increase in employers' national insurance, which has added over £6 million to the council's costs over the next year. This so-called record settlement, to my mind, is given with one hand to take with the other. So in my book, neither the SNP or Labour are getting off the hook for the situation that we find ourselves in. It is in that challenging context that we have tried to, in our budget proposals this year, try to reduce any detrimental impact to council services while bearing in mind the household pressure budget. For the foregoing reasons, I commend the amendment to the Chamber.
Thank you for that. Councillor Shears, please.
Thanks, Convener. I'll keep it very short. We won't take any lectures from the Liberal Democrats on the state of public finances, given that the whole state of public finances in the UK was entirely enabled by them. when they put David Cameron in power.
That's commendably brief. Thank you. Councillor Rome, please. You've got that to live up to.
Yes, thank you, Chair. That was commendably brief and has slightly thrown me in terms of coming in. Just two things I want to briefly touch on. One was Bailey Scott's comments regarding inflation, and I would just go back to my previous comment, which is that we simply can't pretend that the inflation environment we've been through didn't exist. And I think families acknowledge that if they want to see service improvement rather than detriment, that we need to have the resources to do that. Just coming on to the Liberal Democrat budget, you know, I share the Liberal Democrats' concerns with road maintenance going forward, and I think we've all seen issues in our wards that we would like to see improve. And have there been any approach for this budget in terms of working together to see how we could do that, or have I thought that this budget from the Liberal Democrats was realistic in terms of the savings that they will achieve in the next year? I could potentially see my way to support it, but there hasn't, and I don't, so I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Be welcomed even more if I switch my microphone on. Councillor Anderson, please.
Sorry, convener, I've withdrawn the comment.
Oh, that's fine. Even better. Getting through this. Councillor Holland.
Ditto, withdrawn comment.
In that case, no further comments. We'll go to the vote, please.
Thank you very much. Bailey Source. So the motion by yourself, seconded by Councillor Mills, has been circulated, and the amendment by Councillor Duncan, seconded by Councillor Crichton, is also circulated. Bailey Source.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Black.
Motion.
Provost Campbell.
Motion.
Deputy Provost Cardell.
Motion.
Bailey Dawson.
The motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Hunter.
Motion.
Councillor Litton.
Motion.
Councillor Mills.
Motion, please.
Bailey Roberts.
Motion.
Councillor Rome.
Motion, please.
Councillor Short.
The motion, please.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Toland.
Motion, please.
Bailey Keenan.
No vote.
Councillor Cruikshank.
No vote.
Councillor Finnegan.
No vote.
Councillor McHugh.
No vote.
Councillor McKerven.
No vote.
Councillor Scullen.
No vote.
Councillor Shears.
No vote.
Bailey Wright.
No vote.
Bailey McPherson.
The amendment.
Councillor Coleman.
The amendment.
Councillor Crichton.
Amendment.
Councillor Duncan.
Amendment.
Bailey Scott.
Amendment.
And 5 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
That's all the business. So thank you all for your attendance. Those of you who actually did attend.